So, today we are talking about fearful dogs, and in particular, dogs who are quite fearful, are a flight risk, and need kind of some special housing considerations and setup when in your care. I wrote this presentation in the slides in a way that could be used for people bringing home a new foster dog or newly adopted dog who is fearful. But if you already have a dog at home who's struggling, a lot of these tips will be relevant to you as well. And there may be some things you haven't thought about that could save you grief later on. So let's jump into the slides I have made for you today. Okay, so bringing home a fearful dog, preparation is what this one is titled. And like I said, it doesn't have to be, this doesn't have to be only for a dog coming home today. It could be a dog you've had at your home for a little while. You're still going to probably find some help here. But if someone is lucky enough to think about this before they go pick up their new dog or their new foster, I hope this will save them some trouble. Okay, so these risks here are high for a fearful dog on the first day, especially that you bring them home. But, it's not only relevant to that first day at home. Fearful dogs are flight risks. They can be bite risks. They almost certainly will have accidents, like potty accidents in the house. And if you are lucky enough to be watching this before you bring a dog home for the first time, you have the opportunity to make good or not so good first impressions. And these are all important. So if you have the luxury, you should plan ahead. And so some of the details I'm going to give now, they can be implemented later, but if you're able to do it before you bring the dog home, it just makes everything a little easier. These are the 3 areas I wanted to cover today. One is setting up your fearful dog's safe space in the house. Where are they going to be spending most of their time, especially in the beginning? That's not a good picture for this, but how to avoid sort of predictable safety or security issues with it, especially with a dog who could be a flight risk. Oops, sorry about that. And then finally, transport, how moving a fearful dog around, not within the house, but if you need to drive them somewhere or when you go pick them up, say from a shelter or rescue, how can you make it go as smoothly as possible and reduce the risk of something going really wrong? Okay, so if you are able to set up a really good safe space for your dog, your new dog, foster dog, or adopted dog, you can avoid a lot of problems early on. So one of the biggest areas where people run into trouble is where they bring a fearful dog home and then they want the dog to go outside or to sleep somewhere or whatever, and the dog doesn't like to be touched. And now the dog is in a place where the person, the caregiver, adopter, foster home, feels the need to move them, and they don't know how to move them without touching them. So a good safe space setup for a fearful dog will be a place where you're fine with the dog just staying there and you do not need to touch them. There will be no requirement for you to touch them. There needs to be an access to some kind of potty area, and we'll look at a couple different options for that. And again, one they can get to without you touching them. And there need to be hiding places. And I kind of like a couple levels or a couple layers of hiding places. Oh, I also wrote low traffic. That's if you have different areas in your house that might serve for the safe space, you could, I would go for the one that is not in the middle of like the main family area. Okay, so we're going to look at just a few examples from my own foster dogs. With these 3 things, these 3 key points we're looking at as reminders on one side of the slide. So Is this setup allow me to not touch the dog? Do they have access to a potty area? Are there hiding spots? This first one was for a short-term foster who didn't tolerate touch at all. And so what we did is set up a crate, and so it's one of those plastic crates, so it provides some hiding spot in and of itself, underneath a table. So that's already two kinds of kind of cover for them, the crate and then the table over top. And then we put a pen around it, and although I don't have it in this picture, we would usually have a lot of this pen covered with sheets or blankets. So the dog is, you don't want your fearful dog to only be able to hide if they're inside their crate. They need to be able to explore, to leave that area a little bit, especially to eliminate. So having some kind of pen, but that you've made the sides opaque, or at least some of the sides opaque, will give them, usually they seem to get some feeling of security from that and be more willing to move around. So we have several options for hiding spots here. No touch. So we were fine with her staying in there. We didn't need to touch her at all. We did not have a potty area in this pen, but I'll show you here. We did have a no touch option for giving her outdoor access. So I could open up that pen to the sliding glass door to the backyard, and then she could just go right on out and then come back in on her own. So we tick all the boxes here. We don't have to touch the dog. She can get to a potty area, and she has lots of hiding spots. Here's a little bit fancier one. This was Pancake's area, sort of not right in the beginning, but a little later, back in our house in Davis. So again, this was kind of in a back room. It was actually my office, but it was fine for him to stay there. We didn't have to touch him. We could deliver everything he needed to this place. In terms of hiding spots, there you can see there's a crate there. And also, this was later on when he was more comfortable, but initially we also had this fencing covered with sheets so that he could move around outside his crate and feel more protected. And then he also had access to a potty area outdoors. You can see here the dog door there. So this was kind of a little self-sufficient area for him. We didn't have to mess with him. I could come in, drop treats, leave. But there was nothing other than cleaning up occasional messes. There was nothing forcing me to be in there. One nice option or nice aspect of this one that is can be harder to come up with if you don't have the ability to set up a safe space next to an outdoor access point is that if I needed to come into that pen, he could get plenty of distance from me if he wanted to, because he could just go outside. Okay, so now I'm going to look at one last one. This is a different example. It's also for Pancake, but in a different house where we did not have a good setup for him to have direct outdoor access. So this might look a little involved, but we knew this could be long-term. And this is a dog who, at this time that we were setting this up, would not tolerate touch, didn't really like people, didn't seem to really like our dogs, was definitely not house trained and marked quite a bit, a male dog, so we would lift his leg on things. So we cleared out this area where normally our kitchen table would be, brought in an X pen, that's that portable lightweight fencing there, covered it with a tarp, and it's like we cut the tarp to fit the X pen and zip tied it, and then made sure that the tarp covered the whole floor where the pen was going to be. We then moved the kitchen table back in there, and you can see that provides a hiding spot behind the table. Plus, we had nowhere else to put the table. Added lots of bedding. Then closed off the pen with another X pen and added sheets so that he had lots of privacy. Now, because we didn't have a good way to get him outside without touching him, and it's also a little bit riskier up here for small dogs to be outside on their own, there are predators, we made sure that he had easy access to a potty area inside his pen. So you see there, he's sitting on some fake turf, and there are some potty pads. And this is just another angle to show that so this is a male dog who likes to lift his leg to pee, so we provided vertical potty pads as well. So we had some potty pads taped or later clipped to the side of the X pen. Okay, so that's a short intro to safe spaces for a fearful dog. The biggest things I'd like you to take away from that are that you want to set up your new or fearful dog's safe space so that you do not have to force any interaction. You know, if they're especially scared today, or if they're just learning to trust you, you don't need to go try to like pick them up or touch them. They can get everything they need in their safe space. If you have any questions about setting up that safe space, go ahead and put them in the comments. I'm going to move on to just a little bit of safety related stuff. So fearful dogs are really hard to catch if they get loose. And this is especially true if this is a new foster or newly adopted dog. Sometimes bad stuff happens. If these dogs get loose, someone corners them and they bite, or they actually, run off and get hit by a car. So preventing escapes is pretty important. So points to think about if you have a fearful dog or are going to adopt or foster a fearful dog who could be a flight risk include front door security. So prevent the dog from being able to dash out the door. And I'll show you one example of how to do that. Checking your gates and fences if you have a backyard that the dog will be using, to eliminate or whatever, just for outdoor time. And then make sure that the dog has a collar with ID on it, ideally a microchip. And if you think you're going to need a harness or leash on the dog, you'll want that too. And I know that a lot of times these dogs don't tolerate handling very well if they're pretty fearful. So if you're getting this dog for the first time and you are picking it up from a foster home or a shelter, if there's anyone there the dog sort of trusts who could put on the gear for you, that would be preferable. So they already have something on before you get them home. All right, here's just a couple examples of front door security. We also like this, by the way, those of you whose dogs are fearful of strangers or people coming to the door. This prevents immediate access to the front door if someone were to open it. So good for flight risk dogs, also good for dogs who are fearful and aggressive towards strangers coming in. This is a 3-panel baby gate that you can, I believe this one, when they're at an angle like this, you can't pressure mount it. So you would need to use hardware to drill it into the wall. But if you can do that, I think it's quite worth the peace of mind and extra safety. The backyard can be, if you have a backyard that the fearful dog will be accessing, you're going to want to check your fence carefully. Loose boards, any little holes that could be easily enlarged to let the dog go under the fence, or if it's a larger dog. If you can see here, these cross beams on our fence at the top of, those are probably like 5 feet up. A lot of large dogs could get their paws up on that and then hoist themselves over the fence. So you have to think about dogs going through holes, under or over the fence. I don't know if you can tell in this photo, but we have this wire mesh stuff nailed to the top of our fence and then bent in at a 45-degree angle. And that's because we have huskies who are athletic. So this is our backyard when Pancake first came to us, and I did walk the fence and it looked pretty good, but small dogs sometimes find holes in fences that you don't see. So as an additional safety measure, we put a second interior fence here. This is an X-pen that's carabinered to we had some other kind of wire fencing stuff here to create kind of a smaller subset of the yard that he could access, but I didn't have to worry about him sort of probing the whole fence of the backyard looking for a way out. This is just another photo of that. So it is a pretty good sized area. Just a word on gear to have on a fearful dog. You do want tags on them. If you're going to have a leash on the dog, you'll want either a harness or at least a martingale collar. This is a martingale collar here. It's also called a limited slip collar. You put the leash, sort of the solid brown loop there is the limited slip part. You put the leash on the ring there, and then if the dog tries, like freaks or panics and tries to back out, it tightens a little bit so they can't squeeze their head out, as long as it's fitted properly. So a martingale collar is one good piece of equipment to have for a dog who's a flight risk. Although a good fitting harness is also nice to have, but I know it's harder to get a harness onto a fearful dog. And then do make sure as best you can they have identification. And if that means bringing tags, say, to the shelter or rescue and asking them to put them on the dog for you because the dog's more comfortable with the staff, that's great. Do that instead of pushing it when you get home. Okay, one of the biggest places where parents of fearful dogs or new adopters or fosters run into big trouble is moving around fearful dogs. So maybe you're picking up a dog from the shelter or rescue, maybe you're driving the dog to the vet, or picking them up from the vet. There are lots of opportunities for things to go wrong, but with a little extra care, you can avoid most of these. So my recommendation is to transport these fearful dogs in a secure crate whenever possible. And so if you're going to pick up a new foster or adoptive dog, bring a crate with you and do check all the latches, the screws that hold the two halves together, the bottom and top. Check the handle. Make sure that, you don't pick it up by the handle and it just is going to falling down and breaking. I've seen every one of these problems happen before. Make sure it's in good repair and it's going to hold together. Anytime that you are loading or unloading a fearful dog out of a crate, they should be inside a secured area. So what that might mean if you're picking up at the vet clinic or at a shelter or rescue is that you give the crate to the vet clinic staff or the foster mom or the shelter staff, and they take that inside a room that they can shut the door to the outside so there is no way to get out, load the dog in, close the crate so it's secure, and then carry that secured crate to your car. And then at home, same thing. You're going to want to carry the crate in. And I know with larger dogs, this is a little bit difficult. You might need 2 people. But if you have a very fearful dog that if they got loose, you wouldn't get them back, this is worth thinking about how you can make this work. So go, carry the crate into the house, place it in their safe space, then open the door. So this is just an example of, this is little Pancake on his way from the valley down our house in Davis up to Tahoe, where he lives now. We had him in a secure crate, and covered it with a blanket, so it was a little less scary, so he couldn't just see the whole big wide world. Secured him in the car, and then drove him a couple hours up to the mountains. And then here's his crate in his safe area, and that was not opened until we were in the house, all doors closed. And it was safe to let him out. Okay, so that was a real quick look at sort of the very intro level stuff that you want to think about with a scared dog. Where's their safe space, and can you make one where you don't have to touch them or mess with them? And that may mean making an indoor potty area. How can you make sure your house and yard are secure enough so you don't end up with a dog who's loose and you cannot catch them? And then anytime you're transporting a fearful dog, how can you make sure there is no opportunity for them to end up loose on the road? All right. So I hope this was helpful. Any questions about any of this? Safe spaces, safety with fearful dogs, transporting fearful dogs. Now, these measures might sound like overkill if you don't have a really severely fearful dog. But for those of you who do, for those of you who have dogs who are like afraid of the outdoors, maybe afraid of you, none of this stuff is overkill. This is all important.